The Last Flame of Dragonsbane, written by Short Story Queen. Chapter 1. The Man Who Hunts Fire. The storm had come hard and sudden, shredding the tree line with claws of ice. Snow spun in mad spirals, blinding the path behind him, muffling every footstep like a shroud. He moved without sound, without fear, wrapped in the grim discipline that had carved him into a weapon since boyhood. Somewhere ahead, something warm was breathing. The scent hit first, not human, not beast. A copper tang laced with wood smoke and wild lilac, the scent of magic twisted by dragon blood. Arlen's grip tightened on the hilt at his side. The bastard thing was close. No older than 10, if the village reports were true. An accident. A myth reborn in skin and fire. He found the child crouched beneath the ribs of a half-collapsed stone archway. Dark hair soaked and plastered to pale skin. A boy, half-starved, half-hidden, his hands trembling as they clutched a torn blanket against his chest. And his eyes. Gods. His eyes were wrong, gold like coins burning from within. Arlen stepped forward without drawing breath, the long silver blade whispering from its sheath. The boy stared back, silent, unmoving. One stroke. No scream. Quick. Clean. His hand didn't move. Snow stung the back of his neck, slid down his collar, but he remained still, blade poised like a question he couldn't answer. The boy blinked, his lips parted. Please? That was all. One word. Small. Too small to matter. But it cracked something inside him anyway. A flicker of memory, a much younger voice in a much darker place. A door slamming. Flames dancing along the beams of a burning house. A scream, cut short. Arlen lowered the blade. Not entirely. Just an inch. Just enough. He turned and walked away. 3 days later, they sent him to Black Hollow. No punishment, no questions, only a scroll sealed in black wax and the name of a new target. A healer. A woman. An anomaly. South of the frost marsh, buried in mountain snow. Unregistered, unwatched, possibly unhuman. And so he went, like he always had, on foot, on instinct, without asking why. The road north bit through the sole of his boots and the meat of his mind. No one traveled it unless they had something to flee. Bandits and bitter ghosts clung to its edges. Arlen saw neither. Only the endless press of frost, the ache in his spine, and the quiet, pulsing hum beneath his ribs where the vial of dragon blood rested in its case against his skin. He hadn't drunk it, not in weeks, not since the child. Still it called to him. Warmth in exchange for a piece of himself. Magic for the price of becoming something else. He reached Black Hollow at dusk. The mountains loomed above, jagged black teeth pressing the sky. The village below huddled close to its hearths, smoke trailing from crooked chimneys. Windows shuttered against wind and watchers. No guards, no bells. Just a wooden sign hanging limp at the gate, carved with a symbol of ash and root. He passed beneath it unnoticed. In the center of the square, an old man was hacking apart frozen meat with a rusted cleaver. Chickens darted between his feet. A woman scraped frost from her cartwheels, muttering to herself. Children peeked through doorways and vanished just as quick. No one looked twice, no one asked names. It suited him. His shoulder ached where the last skirmish left a shallow gouge. Too deep for salve, not deep enough to kill. He could have healed it. One drop, one vial. But he didn't. Instead, he found the healer. She stood barefoot in snow. A fire snapped in the brazier beside her, scenting the air with pine and citrus peel. Her hands moved over a young man's leg, setting a splint. Her touch quick and sure despite the cold. Her cloak was loose, her sleeves rolled, her skin pale with a golden sheen like moonlight through smoke. And her eyes. He nearly stopped breathing. Gold, but not like the child's. These were darker, older, wiser. As if they'd seen something beyond the walls of this quiet place. Something he wasn't meant to see. She looked up then. Not startled, not curious, just quiet. Their eyes locked. The silence grew thick around it. He could feel it coil between them, something raw and wrong and impossibly magnetic. Then, like it meant nothing at all, she smiled. "You're bleeding," she said softly. He hadn't noticed. The cut had reopened along his collar. She crossed the square with no hesitation. She didn't ask who he was or why he wore no mark of house or station. She didn't even flinch as she brushed aside his cloak and pressed warm fingers to cold skin. The wound sizzled, not painfully, not magically, just contact. His breath caught without reason. "You should come by the apothecary," she said. "This will fester if it's not cleaned properly." "I've had worse." "You'll still have worse if you're not careful." He didn't answer. The words tasted like iron and regret. She stepped back and let him go. Later, he stood in the borrowed room of the tavern, staring at the flame of the single candle he'd lit. The wax had begun to melt in thick rivulets, slow and patient, like time itself. He hadn't spoken her name aloud, hadn't even asked it, but it echoed in his head anyway. Lyra. She moved like someone who knew she was being watched. She smiled like someone who had nothing left to hide. And her eyes held fire. Not the kind that burns, the kind that remembers. He had come here to kill an anomaly, to finish what the Order had begun, but now he wasn't sure who the real anomaly was. The hunter or the flame. Chapter 2. The woman with golden eyes. Snow glazed the rooftops of Black Hollow like a burial cloth. The morning was gray, not from lack of light, but from its refusal to bloom. A hush lived in this village, not one of peace, but of cautious preservation, like something precious was hidden just beneath its frost-bitten skin. Arlen watched her from the edge of the square, beneath the eave of the baker's loft, where the scent of burned rye and pine ash filled the air. She was gathering dried birch leaves into a linen pouch, her movements neither rushed nor idle. There was a rhythm to her, an old one, like the forest moved in her bones. The villagers passed her without comment, like she'd always been there, like they didn't see what he did. Or perhaps they did and had chosen silence as shield. Her name came to him by accident, overheard when a boy scraped his knee falling on the ice and ran crying to her door. Lyra. Not a common name. Not in this part of Viralia. It clung to the air like a half-remembered song. Something pulled from the forgotten part of the world, the part no longer spoken of in cities or courts. She didn't wear gloves despite the cold. Her fingers, pale as porcelain, moved nimbly across bark and twine, tying herbs into bundles, as if each stem held its own language. Every motion of her body was practical, precise. But there was something soft that lingered in her wake, something not quite human, not quite holy. He watched longer than he should have. When she turned her head slightly toward him, not directly, just enough to suggest she had known he was there all along, he didn't flinch, but something tightened in his chest like a knot that had been pulled too many times. By dusk, his excuse came. The tavern stairwell gave way beneath a drunk's elbow, sending a nail the length of a finger slicing through the side of Arlen's palm. Not deep. Enough. He went to her door without knocking. He wasn't sure why. He could have stitched it himself. He'd sewn up wounds worse than this with the edge of a broken blade and the firelight of a dying comrade. But something had drawn him up those 3 wooden steps. The door opened before he raised his hand. Her gaze flicked to the wound, then to him. She didn't speak. She only stepped back, letting him enter as if the room already knew his shape. It was warm inside, but not with hearth fire. The warmth came from herbs hung in drying garlands along the ceiling. Lavender, dragonroot, bonesage. The air felt alive, humming with something unseen. Bottles and clay pots lined the shelves. A cauldron simmered gently in the corner, though nothing bubbled from within. It was a room for healing, yes, but it felt like something more. A place of secrets, a sanctum dressed as a cottage. She gestured to a stool beside the hearth. He sat without question. She didn't ask what had happened, didn't need to. Her touch was colder than he remembered, or perhaps he was simply more aware of it now. She took his hand and turned it delicately, like she was studying a map in a forgotten language. She didn't speak as she cleaned it, didn't wince when he did. Her movements were practiced, methodical, but never cold, never indifferent. She used no magic, not openly, but he felt something. The air shifted slightly around her, just at the edges, like wind around a sleeping fire. "I saw you watching me," she said finally, her voice soft but not meek. "This morning, and yesterday." He didn't answer right away. The truth was a blade with no hilt, too honest, and it would cut both ways. "You're not like the others here." "And what are the others like?" "They're trying to stay invisible." "And you think I'm not?" She looked up then, her golden eyes unreadable. There was no anger in them, only knowing. He should have said something cold, something to distance her. Instead, he let the silence sit between them like a second heartbeat. She turned back to the wound. The cloth in her hand darkened slightly with blood. "I know what you are," he said, quieter than he meant. She didn't freeze, but her hand stilled for the briefest second the way a deer stills before it bolts. "What is it you think I am?" "Not just a healer." Another pause, not fear, just thought. "Neither are you." He looked at her then. Really looked. Her cheekbones high and clean. Her mouth unsmiling but not unkind. The faintest mark along her collarbone where scales, once hidden, had left a trace under skin. Barely there. Not visible unless one had been trained to see such things. She knew, and she knew he knew. Still, she said nothing. When she finished binding the hand, she stood and stepped away, wiping her palms on her apron. There was distance again, measured, intentional. "You're not from here," she said. "That's obvious, so what is it you're looking for?" He could have lied, he should have, he was trained to. But something in her voice, flat, too neutral, sounded like someone who had spent too many years being lied to. "An answer," he said finally. "To what?" "To whether monsters know they're monsters." A strange quiet followed. Not awkward, almost reverent. Then at last a whisper of something he hadn't expected. "They do," she said. "They just hope no one else sees it." He didn't sleep that night. The cot in the tavern was warm, the fire still lit, but his thoughts wandered, restless. Her eyes, the way they had caught the firelight without blinking. Her voice, how it had said so much with so little. The scent of her skin, pine and ash, and a sweetness he couldn't place. And the way she hadn't run. She should have, any of them would have, but not her, and something told him she never would. Chapter 3. Blood beneath the snow. The frost deepened overnight. Long tendrils of ice crept along the window panes like pale veins, and the wind rose howling through the forest beyond the village, as if something old and angry stirred beneath the roots. Arlen stood at the edge of the clearing before dawn, his breath fogging in the brittle air, watching the faint plume of smoke rise from Lyra's chimney. He had dreamed again, not of fire, not this time, of her, not her face. He couldn't see it clearly, not in the dream, but her presence, the sound of her steps through fresh snow, the ghost of warmth pressed beside him in the dark. He had woken with the strange sense that someone had called his name. The wound in his palm had reopened. He bound it tightly and left before the village stirred. She found him again at midday. No greeting, no hesitation. She walked up beside him where he crouched beneath a bent pine gathering snowberries and extended a small pouch. He didn't reach for it. She placed it beside him anyway. "For the pain," she said. I didn't ask." "No, you didn't." The silence hung thick between them, but not hollow. There was a weight to it now. Shared. A quiet acknowledgement neither of them dared name. He looked down at the berries. Most were half-frozen, bruised. Some still bore faint traces of rot, but her hands had picked out only the best. He knew because he'd counted. When he finally looked up, she was already moving again, heading toward the village edge where the smokehouses stood, wrapped in morning shadow. He watched her go, not because he didn't trust her, but because he didn't know what it meant that he might. Later in the square, the fever came. 3 men collapsed within an hour. Faces flushed, eyes glazed, skin damp with sweat despite the cold. The old woman who sold vinegar screamed as her grandson retched black water into the snow. Panic spread fast in places like this, where isolation gave disease room to bloom unchecked. Arlen moved before he meant to, dragging the boy away from the well as Lyra arrived, her cloak flaring behind her like a banner. She didn't panic, she gave no orders. She simply knelt beside the boy and placed her hand on his forehead, murmuring softly, something between a chant and a prayer. Her palm glowed, just faintly, barely more than the shimmer of frost catching light. But it was there. The villagers didn't see it, and Arlen did. When the boy's spasms eased, Lyra stood and turned to the others, speaking quietly. She told them to boil what water they had, to stay indoors until dusk. She would come to each of them. No need for fear. It was the roots. A bad batch. She would find the source. No one argued. They listened to her like she was something holy. He followed her without thinking. When she entered the smokehouse, the smell nearly staggered him. Spice and brine, and underneath it all, the iron-sweet scent of decay. 3 barrels lined the wall. Lyra stopped before the one in the center, lifted the lid, and peered inside. Her body stilled, her breath hitching almost imperceptibly. "Dragon root," she whispered. "Uncured. Someone's been selling it raw." He stepped closer. "It doesn't grow here." "No," she said quietly. "It doesn't." When she looked at him, something had changed in her expression. Not suspicion, not fear, just awareness. He wondered if she saw it in him now, the tremor beneath his control, the weight of purpose behind his silence. "I need to burn it," she said, "tonight when the wind is still." He nodded once. "I'll help." She hesitated, not because she didn't believe him, but because believing him was dangerous. When the fire was lit that night, it was behind the apothecary, hidden from view. Dragonroot burned dark. No smoke, no flare, just a deep, slow, crimson coil of light, as if the root itself remembered what it had once been. Magic seeped out in waves. The air grew warmer. The snow melted in a perfect circle around the flame. She stood beside him, her arms wrapped around herself, not from cold, but from memory. "I hate it," she murmured, "what it does to people, what it takes from them." "It's why I'm still breathing," he said, not as confession, not as plea, just fact. She turned her head. "You take it?" "Not often, but enough." He didn't reply. The fire cracked softly, a sound like old wood snapping under pressure. The air thickened around them, heavier than snow, heavier than silence. He could feel her watching him, not with judgment, but with something else. Something dangerously close to understanding. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "I know. They'll find you eventually." "I know that too." She exhaled slowly, her breath a ribbon of steam between them. Her face was half in shadow, half in firelight. Her eyes, golden and unblinking, studied him like a riddle that had stopped being worth solving. When she reached for his injured hand again, it wasn't with the precision of a healer. It was slower this time. Careful. Her fingers brushed the edge of his wrist, then rested over the bandage, warm through the cloth. Her touch was steady, but her throat worked once in a swallow. "You shouldn't be here," she said again. This time her voice had no strength behind it. He closed his eyes. "I know." And still neither of them moved. Chapter 4. The Taste of Ash. By morning, the village was silent again. The fever had broken, the air clearer, sharper, too clean. Arlen left his room before the tavern stirred and walked the frozen lanes with the disquiet of a man who could no longer tell whether he'd done right or merely postponed something inevitable. The snow bore traces of what they had burned, the roots reduced to fine black dust that had drifted into the corners of the square. It looked like ash after a storm, like memory. He pressed a gloved hand against the wall of Lyra's apothecary as he passed, feeling the warmth that lingered faintly beneath the wood. Unnatural for a night so cold. He wondered how long her kind could hide warmth before it betrayed them. Inside she was cleaning, not as a task but as a ritual. Each bottle returned precisely to its shelf, each cloth wrung and folded. Her hair had come loose during the night. It fell down her back in dark, uncombed waves. There was a stillness to her, not peace but fatigue turned inward. He stood in the doorway without sound. She didn't turn, though he knew she'd felt him enter. "You didn't sleep," he said finally. Her hand paused over the table, fingertips grazing glass. "No." He watched the way she spoke. Not the words, but the weight they carried. Too measured, too even. "You should rest. So should you." She set the vial down gently as if the air itself might shatter it. "I used to believe fire could cleanse," she said, her voice softer now. "That it took away what was poisoned and left only what could grow again. But that was before I understood what fire asks in return." He stepped closer, just enough to catch the faintest glimmer of gold along her lashes. "And what does it ask?" "Everything," she said. The word hung between them like smoke. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that fire was just an element, nothing more. But he couldn't, because she was right, because the taste of ash was still in his mouth and he knew what it meant to let something burn too long. A sound cut through the air then, low, distant, metallic, a bell, faint but unmistakable. Not from the village, from the southern ridge. Arlen turned toward the sound before she even moved. She straightened, her eyes narrowing. "That's not one of ours." "No," he said. "It's theirs." He didn't need to explain. She knew. The order was close. The memory of his brother's face flashed unbidden, Thorn's voice echoing through the smoke of training halls, preaching duty, purity, and war as though they were all the same thing. If he had followed the signal, it meant only one thing: someone had spoken. Someone had seen what they burned. Lyra crossed to the window and pulled the curtain aside. The horizon shimmered faintly beneath the early light, a line of movement along the tree line. Horses, black cloaks, the sigil of Dragonsbane faint on the standard they carried. Her shoulders tensed, but her voice stayed calm. "They're not here for medicine." "No," Arlen said, quieter. "They're here for blood." She turned toward him then, not startled, but with a question buried somewhere behind her gaze. "Then why are you still here?" He didn't have an answer that would make sense, not even to himself. His oath to the order still clung to his bones like a second skin, but the thought of handing her over, to Thorn, to anyone, felt suddenly like betrayal, not of her, but of whatever small, fractured thing in him still believed in mercy. "I'll lead them away," he said. "If they find you here, they won't ask questions." Her jaw tightened. "And what will they ask you?" "Nothing I can't answer." She looked at him for a long time, as if weighing truth against the shape of his voice. The silence that followed was not agreement, but surrender to something heavier than words. She nodded once, slowly. When he left, the sky was beginning to bleed with pale morning light. Frost clung to his lashes, to his cloak, to the seams of his gloves. The air tasted metallic, like the first bite of iron before a storm. He walked past the last row of cottages toward the ridge, each step deliberate, his hand resting on the hilt at his side. By the time he reached the outer fields, the riders had begun to appear, dark shapes against the white, the crunch of hooves breaking rhythm through the quiet. Thorn rode at the front. His armor gleamed with a polish that belonged to men who never stopped believing they were right. "Brother," Thorn called, his voice carrying easily through the cold. "You've been hard to find." Arlen stopped 10 paces away. "You found me anyway." Thorn smiled. "You always leave traces, even when you think you don't." He dismounted slowly, his boots cracking through the crusted snow. "There's talk of corruption in this village. Signs of dragon root, unregistered magic. You've seen it?" Arlen's throat tightened. I've seen the sickness, she cured it. She? Thorn tilted his head, the motion small but sharp as a blade turning. The healer then, the one we heard about. Arlen said nothing. Thorn's eyes narrowed. Where is she? For the first time Arlen felt it. Fear not for himself, but for the fragile warmth that had begun to take shape behind him, in a wooden room strung with herbs and light. He couldn't let them near it. She's gone, he said, took the trade route west. Thorn studied him for a long, brittle silence, then he nodded, though his expression didn't soften. Good, we'll search anyway. Arlen didn't move. You won't find her. Thorn's smile was slight, but there was something cold beneath it. You sound very sure. When the riders moved past, he stood motionless, listening to the clatter of metal fade into distance. The wind rose behind them, scattering snow like ash. Only then did he turn back toward the village, toward the faint thread of smoke still rising from the apothecary roof. Inside, she would know what had happened. She would feel it in the air, in the shift of sound and silence. And he knew before he even saw her again that whatever stood between them now was no longer safety or trust. It was something darker, something binding, something that would burn them both before it let them go. Chapter 5. Fire-sworn lies. The door creaked open before he touched it. He stepped inside, and there she stood, still as shadow, wrapped in the dim glow of twilight leaking through warped glass. She had not lit a lamp. The hearth burned low, embers pulsing orange against the darkness. And yet she saw him, eyes catching the firelight like twin coals as he closed the door behind him. Neither of them spoke. The cold clung to his cloak, melting in slow rivulets down his spine. His gloves were stiff, soaked through, but he didn't remove them. He stood at the threshold, as if something might still hold him back. She didn't ask what they'd said, she didn't have to. She crossed the room with soundless steps, past bundles of crushed sage and jars of powdered root, past the cauldron that hadn't boiled since the fever broke. She moved with the grace of someone who carried too many truths, but had never learned how to lay them down. When she reached him, she paused, close enough for him to feel the warmth that rose faintly from her skin. Her eyes searched his face, not for confirmation, but for fractures. Did he see me? She asked, low and calm. No. She nodded once, but he will. He didn't deny it. The silence after carried the weight of prophecy. Her fingers brushed his sleeve, a ghost of a touch, as if testing whether he was still flesh or something else entirely. She stepped back then, not in fear, but in calculation. I have to leave, she said. No. Her brows lifted slightly. If you run, he continued, they'll chase you. If you stay, I can shield you, at least long enough to what? She asked. Lie to them? Pretend I'm something I'm not? His mouth stayed shut because he already had. You're not like them, Arlen, she said, not softly, but with that dangerous aching steadiness she used when her words weren't just words. But they'll never believe that. They'll never believe you didn't know what I was. He looked down at her hands, pale. Still. But her nails, he noticed now, curved just slightly, sharper than before. Her magic was close to the surface, not by choice. It was the stress, the strain, the walls breaking down. I know a place, he said finally, a day north, empty stone hidden. She said nothing. They'll search this village, all of it, every home, every barn. They'll ask names, measure bloodlines, someone will slip. Still, she didn't move, but her breath caught, just faintly. He took a step closer. You said it yourself, fire takes everything, but maybe it can give us one thing in return. And what's that? He didn't answer, because the truth was too new, too dangerous. Instead, he said, let them believe something else. If they search, let them find what they expect. Give them the story they already want to believe. Her voice lowered. And what story is that? That you belong to me. The words landed between them like flint striking stone. A soft sound, almost nothing, but capable of lighting everything. Her gaze didn't flinch. "If I do that," she said after a moment, "then I can't run, not even if I want to." "You won't want to." His certainty surprised even him, not because he didn't doubt, but because something in her eyes had already answered. Later that night, when the knock came at the door, it was not with fists or force, just the calm, deliberate tap of someone who already expected to be let in. She opened it. Commander Thorne stood on the other side, his armor clean, unmarred by the road. His mouth curved in that same practiced smile Arlen remembered from childhood, a smile that meant nothing good ever followed it. "Evening," Thorne said, voice pleasant as frostbite. "I've been informed there's a healer here." "I'm not taking patients," she said. "No," he said, glancing past her shoulder. "But I imagine your husband is." She didn't react. Not with surprise, not with denial. Only a half-turn, allowing Arlen to step forward into the lamplight. Thorne's smile widened. "So it's true then." "I thought it odd, Arlen disappearing from his post. Word said you'd lost your sword in the marshes." Arlen said nothing. "You always had a way of getting tangled in strange places," Thorne continued. "And strange women." The air between them tightened. Lyra felt it before Arlen even moved. "She's under my protection," Arlen said evenly. "Of course," Thorne said, "which is why I'm here. I need to confirm she's unmarked. Standard inspection." Arlen's jaw clenched, but Lyra, without waiting, extended her arms. The sleeves fell back. Pale skin, no scales, no flame, not tonight. Thorne's eyes narrowed, searching too long, too deliberately. But he found nothing. "Seems clean enough," he said, stepping back. But something lingered in his expression, like a dog that hadn't quite caught the scent but knew it had passed. He tipped an imaginary hat. "My mistake, then. Enjoy your quiet little life." When the door shut, it did so without a sound. She stood still, her breath shallow. He didn't move toward her, he didn't speak. But the silence between them had shifted again. Not tension now, not suspicion, but the fragile hum of something unspoken, taking root. He looked at her hands, still extended. Her breath fogged faintly in the cold. And without meaning to, he reached out, not to claim, not to command, but to hold. She didn't pull away, not this time. Chapter 6. The Frostmarsh Pact. The fire had died by morning, but neither of them had relit it. The coals sat cold in the hearth, untouched, their silence more telling than flame. The floor creaked softly beneath Lyra's steps as she packed, careful and deliberate, her hands folding linen around jars and roots, herbs measured without hurry, though her pulse had long since betrayed her calm. Arlen stood by the window watching the village lose its shape to the rising wind. Snow moved in long, unbroken sheets, veiling the rooftops in white. The sky was the color of bone. Beyond the forest's edge, black horses waited, restless in the storm. He had lied for her, lied with her. Now there was nothing left to do but run. She didn't speak, not at first. She moved like someone who had done this before, leaving in silence, shedding the shape of a life too easily abandoned. But she paused before sealing the satchel, one hand hovering above a long crystal vial that shimmered faintly with opalescent light. "Will you still protect me?" she asked, her voice nearly lost beneath the wind outside. "When I can no longer pretend to be harmless?" He didn't answer right away because he didn't know. But he crossed the room anyway, boots silent on the wooden floor, and took the vial from her hand, held it up to the gray light bleeding through the shutters, watched the color twist inside it, like smoke caught in water. "What is it?" he asked. "My blood," she said. "The last of it. Unburned. Unchanged." He looked at her then, more carefully than before. She hadn't dressed as a healer now. No cloak, no apron. She wore the clothes of a traveler, but the bones of something older still showed beneath. Her posture, straight as flame, her jaw, clenched with the knowledge of what came next. "There's a pass through Frostmarsh," he said. "North, then west. 2 days if the ice doesn't crack." "And if it does?" He didn't blink. "Then we fall." She nodded once. By dusk, they were gone. No goodbyes, no explanations, just the hollow sound of the wind closing in behind them and the tracks they left disappearing in minutes beneath the snow. The frost marsh stretched before them like a wound in the land, flat, frozen, vast. No trees, no shelter, only white, endless and unforgiving. The wind there didn't howl, it whispered, words not meant for humans. Arlen moved ahead, mapping the path by memory, not sight. Beneath the surface, black water shifted, an old river, still living, still listening. Every step was a question, every crack beneath the ice, an answer. Lyra kept pace without complaint. He glanced back once. Her hair had come loose again, streaked with frost, the tips tangled in her collar. Her breath fogged in short bursts, but she never once asked how much farther. When they stopped for the night, it was beneath a stone arch half buried in snow, remnants of a ruin no one had named in centuries. He cleared the space with slow, deliberate movements, brushing snow away until the frost gave way to stone. She lit no fire. It would only invite things they couldn't see. Instead, they sat close, knees touching, the cold pressing in from every side. Her hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, from restraint. "You're not what I expected," she said softly. "Neither are you." He wasn't sure if it was an insult or not. He didn't care. "Do you know what I am?" she asked. "Yes. And you're still here." "I am." Another silence stretched, and he felt it shift. This time not with danger, but with something more uncertain, more human. She looked down at her hands, the knuckles pale, the fingertips bruised with cold. She flexed them once, and her skin shimmered faintly, just beneath the surface, like embers beneath snow. "I was told once," she said, voice low, "that if a Dracaris ever bonded with a human willingly, the bloodline would merge. The child born of that union would carry both magics, and the hunt would end." He turned toward her slowly. "You believe that?" "I believe I don't want to die hiding," she said, "and I don't want to live alone." The words struck deeper than he let show. He looked at her, at the way her breath caught after speaking, not with hope, but with the ache of someone who had learned not to expect answers. She didn't move closer, but she didn't pull away when he did. His gloved hand reached out, fingers grazing the inside of her wrist. Her pulse fluttered beneath his touch. Not frantic, just real, just alive. And when he leaned forward, breath brushing the line of her jaw, she closed her eyes, not with submission, but with trust. Their mouths met, not hungrily, not with the desperate crush of those who'd been starved, but with the quiet certainty of something chosen, something sacred. His hand slid to her neck, her skin hot beneath his touch, and for a moment there was no cold, no wind, no ice, only her, only him. When they parted, it was not with words but with silence that pulsed in the space between them like a vow neither had spoken aloud. And still, beneath the surface of the marsh, something listened. Chapter 7. The Old Fire. The mountains gave way to stone and silence. By dusk on the second day, the frost broke beneath their boots, not into water, but into memory. The ground here had not known warmth in generations, yet something stirred beneath it, like breath drawn through ancient lungs. Ashvale. The name had not been spoken aloud between them, but both had known the moment they crossed its threshold. The trees thinned. The snow grew shallow, and the bones of old towers jutted from the earth like fingers frozen mid-prayer. The city had not been built by men, not entirely. Massive pillars lay half-sunk in snowdrifts, their surfaces etched with runes long dead. Black ivy clung to what was once a palace, now a hollow shell of arches and broken ribs. Wind passed through it all without sound, as if even the air knew not to wake what slept beneath. Lyra stepped carefully through the shattered entrance. Her boots left no prints. Her breath caught, then softened, as if the stillness had reached inside her and gently shut every open door. She looked back once, not to check if Arlen followed. She knew he did. but as if to confirm that something in her was leaving footprints too. He joined her at the center of the ruin where the last rays of light fell through a broken dome. There the stone was still warm, just slightly, just enough. She knelt, not to pray. There were no gods left here. The wind curled around her in slow circles, lifting her hair just slightly as she touched her fingertips to the moss-slick floor. Then she closed her eyes. Not magic, not yet, just remembering. This place, she said, barely above a whisper, was the last place they flew from. He stood behind her, watching the outline of her body in the fading light. She looked almost insubstantial, as though the ruins were claiming her for themselves. They died here, he said. She nodded once, but not all of them. Her hand flattened across the stone. I was born under this sky, she murmured. Not in this place, but not far. My mother crossed these ruins while in labor. They say the snow caught fire that night. He said nothing, but the silence he gave was reverent. She turned to him slowly, rising, her face lit not by sun but by the faint pulse of something beneath the stone. Do you ever wonder, she asked, if you were meant for more than what you were made into? His throat tightened. She stepped closer, not hesitantly, not boldly. Simply, sure. You were forged to kill us, all of us, but here you are. He didn't answer. She reached up, and this time her hand rested against his chest, not where his heart beat, but slightly above it, as if she sensed something deeper buried there. And here I am, she said, still breathing. He took her hand, not as claim, as answer. The sun sank lower. The ruins dimmed. When they made camp, it was inside what had once been a vaulted hall. Its ceiling collapsed, stars now scattered across black stone. The wind died here. The air grew still. Time softened its grip. They sat beside a shallow basin, long since dry. Moss had overtaken its edge. Ivy ran through its center like veins. She sat with her knees drawn up beneath her cloak, arms around herself, gaze tilted toward the stars above. I dreamed of you, she said. He turned slowly. Before I ever saw your face, I used to think it was a warning. A hunter. A blade. Her voice softened. But now I wonder if it was a question. He watched her. Watched the way the firelight kissed the curve of her cheek, the hollow of her collarbone, the shape of her mouth. He wanted to reach for her, but not to possess, to answer. You still don't know who I am, he said. She smiled, but the smile was worn at the edges. I know who you were. That isn't the same. No, she agreed, it's not. A beat passed, the wind stirred ivy above their heads, and then she said, Let me decide. She rose slowly and crossed to him. He didn't move, didn't flinch when she knelt between his knees and pressed her hand to the nape of his neck. She leaned in. Not a kiss, and not yet. Her breath brushed his jaw, warm and unhurried. I don't want you to save me, she whispered. I want you to choose me. He closed his eyes, and he did. When their lips met, it was not with hesitation. It was with certainty. With every unspoken word laid down between them like stones across ice. She didn't flinch at his touch, and he didn't break at hers. They kissed slowly, as if learning each other's names for the first time. His hands moved beneath her cloak, fingers brushing the fabric at her spine, trailing up to the back of her neck. Her body leaned into his, not demanding, not yielding, but inviting. They did not speak. There was nothing left to say. When she pulled him down beside her, it was with a breathless kind of reverence. Not hunger, not need, something quieter, deeper, a kind of knowing. They undressed in silence, each movement deliberate, as if every clasp, every layer peeled away, was part of the vow neither had spoken but both understood. The stars watched. The wind stilled. And the last heir of Dracarys gave herself to the one sworn to kill her, beneath the bones of the old world, where fire had once ruled, and might yet rise again. Chapter 8. Thorns of the Blood Oath. The morning came dull and slow, the sun struggling through clouds heavy with ash-gray light. Wind crept back into the valley with a colder tongue, and the air lost its softness. Arlen rose in silence, shoulders tense as he pulled on his cloak, the fire in his limbs not yet cooled from the night before. Lyra lay curled beside the basin, her hair a black sprawl against stone, her face turned away. He watched her for a moment as if imprinting something too fleeting to trust. The earth felt wrong. Not loud enough to flee, but off, a stillness that didn't belong. He crossed the threshold of the ruin's edge and crouched by the crumbled arch, scanning the white horizon. That's when he saw the hoofprints, fresh, deep, too many. They'd been followed, not by villagers, not by scouts, but by Thorn. The markings were clear, 4 riders at least, all heavily armored, wheels of ash at their saddle horns, the mark of purification. Standard execution squad. He didn't curse, didn't panic. He turned on his heel and moved fast, returning through the hall with a blade already in his hand. Lyra was sitting up now, hair falling across her bare shoulder, eyes still half-lidded with sleep. But she saw his face, and stiffened immediately. "How many?" she asked. "Enough to burn this place to ash." She rose, no fear in her limbs, only clarity. She pulled her garments on quickly, hands steady, movements fluid, but he saw the tremor she tried to hide when she reached for her boots, the kind that came when flight was no longer an option. Arlen scanned the exits, none safe. The way west would take them into the ice fields, a death sentence without preparation. The only viable ground was the one they were already standing on. "We make a stand here," he said. Lyra met his eyes. "You'll die if you fight them alone." "I won't be alone." She hesitated, her jaw tightened. Then she said, almost too quietly, "I don't know if I can hold it back this time." He stepped toward her. "Then don't." They didn't have time for ceremony. The riders appeared moments later, shapes dark and sharp against the ruin's edge. Thorn led them, his expression unreadable beneath the wolf-etched steel of his helm. He dismounted with fluid grace, not bothering with pretense. "You always had a weakness for lost things," Thorn said. "But this is treason, even for you." Arlen didn't speak. He stood beside her, sword in hand, every nerve burning. "She's unmarked," he said. Thorn's eyes narrowed. "You think I can't smell it? She reeks of it. She's rotting from the inside out." Lyra didn't flinch, but Arlen saw her hands begin to tremble, not from fear, but from something else. The effort of holding back what no longer wanted to stay buried. "She's not what they say," Arlen said. "No," Thorn replied, drawing his own blade. "She's worse." He raised a gloved hand and gave the order. They charged. Arlen moved first. He struck low, using the broken terrain as cover, his sword whistling past the edge of stone to catch the first soldier mid-step. Blood hit the snow like spilled ink. The second rider came fast, too fast, and tackled him sideways, steel clashing with steel as they tumbled across the ruins. Arlen rolled and kicked free, landing hard against a fallen column. Pain flared across his ribs, sharp and immediate. He couldn't tell if it was cracked or broken. No time to care. The third soldier turned toward Lyra. She stood still, breathing, watching. Something inside her eyes broke open, and then she screamed, not from her throat but from something deeper. The sound ripped through the stone like a blade, and the wind screamed with her. Her body convulsed once violently and her knees hit the stone. Fire licked the edges of her fingers, spreading across her skin like veins of gold lit from within. Her back arched, her mouth opened, and something else came out. Not a roar. A sound older than any language left in Virelia. The soldier raised his sword, too slow. Lyra moved, not like a woman, not anymore. She surged forward, her limbs bending with unnatural speed, her nails hardened into talons, her skin lit with molten light beneath the surface. Her mouth opened wide, and flame poured from her throat. pale gold and white-hot. A fire that did not burn, but devoured. The man screamed only once before he vanished in light. Arlen watched, chest heaving, blood running down his forearm. She stood in the fire now, breathing heavily, her body smoking at the edges. Scales shimmered faintly along her neck, her shoulders, her arms, only in fragments, only where control had failed. But it was her face that shattered him, because she was crying. The fourth soldier fled. Thorn didn't. He stepped forward, fury blazing in his eyes as he unsheathed the longer blade on his back. "You knew," he snarled. "You knew what she was. And you still let her touch you." Arlen lifted his sword. "She chose me, and I chose her." Thorn bared his teeth. "Then you're no longer Dragonsbane. You're just a mongrel who forgot what side he bled for." The fight was brutal, close, fast. Steel screamed against steel, and Arlen felt his muscles giving out, breath shortening with every blow. Thorn fought like someone who wanted to kill, not just win. Every movement was meant to break, to sever, to punish. They clashed near the basin. Arlen slipped once, barely, and Thorn drove the pommel of his blade into his side. He dropped to one knee, vision blurring. But before Thorn could strike again, the air changed. Lyra stepped between them. Not as a dragon, not as a weapon, as herself. Scorched hair tangled across her face, firelight reflecting off tears that had not yet dried. She did not raise her hands, did not call flame. She simply stood there, breathing, golden eyes locked onto Thorn's. And for one moment he hesitated. The fire around her flared. Not from rage, from grief. It lashed out not in a line but in a pulse, a wall, a wave. Thorn was thrown back into the stone, body limp. When the fire faded, she collapsed beside Arlen, trembling, her skin pale, her breath shallow. He caught her before she hit the ground. Her pulse was faint. Too faint. He pressed her to his chest, holding her through the heat still radiating from her skin, and closed his eyes against the rising wind. They had survived, but only just. Chapter 9. The Last Dragonsbane. He carried her until his arms gave out. The climb from Asheville had drained them both. Snow fell in listless sheets, the world narrowing to white and silence. Lyra's body remained warm, too warm, the echo of fire still pulsing beneath her skin. Her breath came in shallow waves against his collarbone. She didn't stir, didn't speak, only clung to the edge of consciousness, drifting deeper with each step he took. He found a hollow beneath an overhang of rock, half collapsed but shielded from the wind. He laid her down carefully, cushioning her head against his cloak, fingers brushing sweat-damp hair from her face. Her skin glowed faintly, veins tinged gold. The magic in her blood had burned too long, too hard. She was unraveling. He had no more time to pretend. He had to go back. The fortress was a day's ride, less if he forced the pace. She would sleep through the night, maybe longer. If he moved now, if he was fast, he could still erase her name from the ledgers, sever the order's hold before Thorn woke and told the truth. He built a fire from frozen branches and kissed her once lightly, where her temple burned against the cold. Then he left. The road north no longer felt like home. The trees leaned in with judgment. The stones cracked louder beneath his boots. Even the wind had changed, sharper now, colder than it had been when he'd first walked this path, still thinking himself a man who knew where the line between right and wrong had been drawn. The gates of the Ember Fortress rose like fangs from the mountainside, red stone scorched black by centuries of fire. They opened at the sight of his blade, still bloodied, still branded, and no one asked what price had been paid for the stains it bore. Inside, the halls were darker than he remembered, no torches, no voices, just cold stone and footsteps that echoed longer than they should have. He moved through the silence without pausing, down into the archive vault, where names were etched in salt and ash and blood. He found the page marked for Black Hollow. Her name was not there, not yet, but it would be. Thorn had seen her. And once the order confirmed it, they would come. They would send more. And more. Arlen's hands moved quickly, burning the report scrolls one by one. The ash curled fast, rising into the small, grated chimney above the hearth. He crushed the sigils under boot and slashed through the blood seal that authorized her as a target. Still, the name burned in his mind like a curse that refused to die. Lyra Davil, the last flame. His breath clouded the air, thick with sweat and smoke. He turned and found Thorn waiting at the threshold. His brother leaned against the frame, arm in a sling, face half wrapped in blood-stained linen. One eye watched him coldly, the other hidden beneath a burn that had not yet healed. "I should have known," Thorn said, voice hoarse, "that you'd run straight here to finish the betrayal." Arlen didn't move. "You left her no choice." "She's not a woman, Arlen. She's a dragon, a creature bred to lie in soft skin and burn cities in their sleep." "She saved me." Thorn stepped forward. "She nearly killed me." "You tried to kill her. And I would again." Silence bled between them. Arlen looked down at the ashes on the table. "I'm done," he said. Thorn's lip curled. "Done with what?" "With this, with oaths forged in fire that burned the wrong people." Thorn drew the dagger from his belt, slow and steady. "You walk away now, there's no coming back. Not to this fortress. Not to your name. Not to who you were." "Then I won't come back." The firelight caught the side of Thorn's ruined face as he stared at his brother, not with rage but with sorrow. The kind of sorrow born from loyalty twisted so tight it had choked itself into something unrecognizable. "You don't get to rewrite what we are," he said. "No," Arlen said quietly, "but I can stop writing her into it." They stared at each other for a long breath, then Arlen stepped past him. He half expected the dagger in his back, but it never came. The wind outside had shifted. By the time he reached the ridge where he'd left her, the fire had died. But she was awake. Barely. She sat curled beneath his cloak, hair tangled, skin pale. Her eyes opened slowly when she heard him. Gold. Dim. But still alive. "You came back," she whispered, voice dry as parchment. "I always would." She tried to smile, but it faltered. "I burned too much," she said. "I can feel it. Slipping." "No," he said, kneeling, cupping her face. "Not yet." Her fingers reached for his, weak but insistent. "I thought you wouldn't choose me if it cost you everything." "I didn't choose you in spite of that," he said. "I chose you because of it." She leaned into him, breath shallow, body trembling. And for a long moment they stayed like that, silent beneath the sky, beneath a world that no longer wanted them. But he held her anyway, and that was enough. Chapter 10. The Last Flame of Dragonsbane. By the time the mountain faded behind them, Ashvale was already a ghost. The snow that once bore their footsteps had erased them without care. No markers, no trail, only the wind whispering where once fire had answered. Arlen did not look back. Lyra could not. Her body was still recovering, breath caught somewhere between fever and memory, her strength like embers tucked under ash. Faint, but not gone. They walked for hours in silence through frost-cracked paths and hollow woods where the trees leaned like bones. The world had lost its shape, and what remained between them was not language but presence, the quiet rhythm of survival pressed into each step. He carried her only when the tremble in her legs betrayed her balance, and even then she protested not with words, but with the soft tightening of her jaw, the refusal to meet his eyes as he lifted her weight into his arms. When they found shelter, it was not because they sought it, but because the land offered it. A clearing opened in the hills where the wind no longer screamed, and the soil had not frozen all the way through. There, beneath a ring of stone and roots twisted with age, Arlen stopped. He placed her gently beside the largest boulder, set his blade down beside her feet, and took in the sky, not for signs of threat, but for the sheer strangeness of a horizon without orders, without war. Days passed and time softened. The wound in Lyra's magic healed slowly, not because it wished to, but because it had to. Each dawn returned a little more strength to her voice, and each dusk brought sleep without tremors. She no longer burned when she touched him. The fire had settled beneath her skin again, not gone, only sleeping. When her hands were steady enough to lift a stone, she began to shape the foundation. Not a home, not yet, just something that could hold their weight. Arlen joined her without needing to be asked. They did not plan or measure, only placed one stone after another in the same quiet way they had survived, without comment, without ceremony, without looking for an end. In time, a structure grew, rough walls first, then a roof, then the small things that made it real, hooks for drying herbs, shelves carved from driftwood, a hearth sealed with clay, and a narrow window that looked out over the frost-shrouded trees. He carved a door that closed without sound. She lined the floor with moss and threadbare cloth. No blades hung on the walls, no symbols of the order were carried forward, not even names. They did not speak of Thorn, nor of the fortress or of the cities that drank dragon blood to poison their own children. They had walked far enough from that world to no longer owe it anything. There were moments when the quiet cracked, not violently, not with grief, but with the weight of remembering. She would sit sometimes near the fire, her hands cupped around a bowl she never drank from, her eyes fixed on the flame as if trying to understand its language. Arlen would watch her without interruption, knowing the thoughts that passed through her belonged to a version of her that had lived and died in another life. He never asked what she was thinking, because he already knew. Spring came late. When it did not announce itself with warmth, but with absence, the absence of snow on the highest branches, the absence of frost on the inner window pane, the absence of wind howling through the cracks. In its place came soft rains and the sudden wild bloom of violet flowers beneath the roots of the black trees. Lyra walked barefoot now. She moved through the clearing with slow precision, her steps lighter, more certain. The fire within her no longer thrashed or clawed. It pulsed, slow and even, a part of her body, not a burden to be hidden. She no longer feared being seen. By the third season, something new had begun to stir beneath her skin. She said nothing of it, not at first, only touched her stomach when she thought he wasn't watching. Only paused longer when she climbed the slope behind their home. But the forest knew before he did. The birds stopped fleeing her shadow. The wind no longer pulled at her hair with suspicion. The world had shifted its posture, as if to welcome something old returning under a new name. When she finally told him, she did not speak the word child. She did not need to. Instead, she placed his hand against her belly and let the warmth speak for her. It was not fire, not yet, only potential, only breath, only the first spark. He closed his eyes then, not out of fear, not out of disbelief, but out of reverence. This was what the Order had tried to prevent. Not war, not bloodshed, but this quiet defiance, this creation of something they could not erase. The birth came on a day of stillness. The sky was soft and colorless. Rain threatened but never fell. Lyra did not cry out, not until the very end, and even then, it was not pain that shaped her voice, but surrender, as if something inside her had finally been allowed to stop fighting. When the child arrived, she did not scream. She opened her eyes, golden and clear, and looked into the fire. They named her Illyra, not after dragons, not after old houses or bloodlines, but after stillness. The breath between flame and ash, the silence that cannot be hunted. Years passed like pages turning gently in a book no longer read aloud. Arlen aged slowly, as if time remembered who he had once been and chose to spare him a little longer. Lyra did not age, not in the same way. The fire preserved her, reshaped her, kept her sharp-edged and soft-eyed, like stone warmed by sun. Their daughter grew, and the world around her bent slightly in her presence. Birds landed on her shoulders. Trees whispered back when she touched their bark. And the first time she asked what a Dragonsbane was, Lyra only smiled and said, "Someone who stopped being afraid of fire." No one came for them. Or if they did, they never found what they were looking for. The old names faded. The fortress crumbled. The scrolls turned to dust. But in the heart of the forest, where the snow no longer dared to fall, a home remained, built not from stone or steel or oaths, but from the simplest, oldest thing that ever burned. Love that refused to die. And in that place, the last flame did not go out. It lit the world anew.